Sorry, Bob. I meant Sir Bob. My apologies. I guess I'm still stuck with the impression from those days. Call me whatever you like. It's all good. All right, understood. But you should drop the formalities too, Bob. And about this afternoon's schedule. My name is Bob, 31 years old. Right now, I'm in a taxi with my secretary, Miss Smith, going over today's schedule. I work as a designer at a major graphic design company. And since taking on this dual role in a position of responsibility, I've been so busy that I need to check my schedule even when I'm on the move. But I'm living fulfilling days. By the way, you stayed at the office last night, didn't you? Yeah, I was swamped with work yesterday, and we had an early meeting this morning, so I ended up sleeping at my desk. In that case, since we have some time before the next meeting, I'll take you home first. I won't insist on a shower, but please change your suit. Some of the people attending today's meeting were also there yesterday. As Miss Smith straightens her back to give directions to the taxi driver, I let out a small sigh and slouch a bit. Though I say my days are fulfilling, the increase in occasions to meet with my subordinates who quite admire me and various corporate bigwigs means I always have to be conscious of how I'm perceived, not just at work but even when I'm out and about. This is the only pain in my current life. However, I'm certain the way people look at me now is different from that unpleasant gaze I used to feel in the past. As I think about this while looking out of the taxi window, I notice it has started to drizzle. Then, in a soft voice, Miss Smith mutters, "Ah, it really did start to rain." Seeing her like that, I reach into my bag and pull out some painkillers. Do you suffer from migraines, don't you? If you'd like, you can take it. When I handed my medicines to Miss Smith, she looked surprised and then smiled kindly. You remembered, that's so nostalgic. I knew her, who showed this kind face, even before I started working at this company. That goes back to my student days when I was aware of the eyes around me. During my first year of middle school, always being frail, I used to carry various medicines with me. For stomach aches, headaches, and even cold medicine for sudden fevers. Due to my weak health constitution, I rarely participated in physical education classes, as advised by my parents, and mostly watched from the shade. Consequently, I was the palest among my male peers. At the onset of middle school, my elementary school friends, now occupied with their clubs, drifted apart. Unable to join a sports team or regularly attend an extracurricular club, I went straight home after school. From then on, I began to feel out of place at school, and by the end of spring, I was completely isolated. Every day after school, I watched the sports teams practice, then walked home alone, feeling sad. I can count how many times I cursed my frail body. But then, a turning point came in my life. As usual, after preparing to leave school and glancing at the track and field team energetically practicing, I headed home. I can't even run a lap around the track, but those track and field team members run several laps around the school, chanting, "They're amazing," I thought to myself. As I walked out of the school gate, I noticed a girl sitting hunched over. Probably she is a track and field team member taking a break, I thought. When I was about to pass by, I noticed her having difficulty breathing. Instinctively, I approached and asked, "Are you okay?" She looked up at me with a dazed expression and replied weakly, "My head ache." Not sure what else to do, I bought her a bottle of water from a nearby vending machine out of my pocket and handed it to her. She slowly drank the water and seemed to calm down. After a while, the schoolgirl, who had been sitting quietly beside me, said softly, "Thank you. You're from the same school, aren't you? Considering your voice hasn't changed yet, so you're a first year, right?" I was so flustered that I hadn't realized it, but the girl was incredibly beautiful. Surprised, I managed to reply softly, Yes. Why are you acting as if feeling guilty about saving me?" The schoolgirl smiled teasingly, seeing me embarrassed. This person, Miss Smith, would later become my secretary. Miss Smith was a junior, 2 years my senior in middle school, attending the same school and serving as the captain of the track and field team. It seems she felt unwell that day and got in trouble while running outside. I always get headaches on rainy or cloudy days like this. Isn't that a migraine? Migraine. Since Miss Smith seemed unfamiliar with migraines, I explained them briefly. Well, I didn't know. Maybe that's why I thought it was dehydration. What? Isn't dehydration serious? What? It happens quite often before big events. To me, the overly active Miss Smith was a dazzling presence. Wanting to support her somehow, I slowly took out a small drawstring pouch from my bag. It's my headache pills I often use. If you'd like, you can take it. As I handed her, she looked surprised and then smiled brightly, saying, "Really? Thank you. Then, I'll return the favor." She took out $1 from her pocket, went to the vending machine, and bought me a can of soda. What? I feel bad about this. Besides, it's against school rules to buy snacks. It's fine. It's fine. At that time, Miss Smith, taller than me, smiled and handed me a can of soda. I received it with both hands, took a sip. Oh, it's delicious. What's that reaction? Like someone who's never had soda before. At that moment, my heart raced seeing Miss Smith laugh mischievously. "By the way, aren't you in a club? Join the track and field team." I can't, because of my health condition." As I apologetically declined, Miss Smith thought for a while and then suggested, "How about the library committee? The committee is short of people and in trouble. I can hardly attend because I'm busy with a club." I thought the library committee sounds fine and was about to look up and smile at Miss Smith. Suddenly, footsteps approached and a tense voice was heard. "Hey, why are you slacking off?" It was Johnson, a student in my grade, with suntanned skin and a slender but muscular physique. He smiled at her but looked at me with sharp eyes. "Excuse me, I'm not slacking off. I'm recruiting." Johnson looked at me and frowned upon listening her words. Then he started laughing mockingly. "Nah, this guy's a lost cause. Always using his weak health as an excuse to skip gym class. Impossible." I couldn't say anything back to Johnson's condescending laughter, just hung my head in shame. Then suddenly, a thud was heard, followed by Johnson's pained shout, "Ouch." To my surprise, when I looked at her, she had apparently thumped Johnson on the head. "That's no way to talk, is it? As your captain, I order you to apologize." Sorry. Tears welled up in Johnson's eyes, and I nodded in a panic. She looked down at us, chuckling. "Then I'll be waiting. Bob. Johnson, get back. And you'll make excuses in case the coach scolds us for wasted time." With that, she ran off energetically. Johnson, holding the top of his head, chased after Miss Smith. At that moment, watching Miss Smith run away, I realized the excitement in my heart was my first love. Soon after, I applied to the library committee. Just as Miss Smith said, the committee wasn't popular and had vacancies, so I started to exert my duty there, even if just for a little while after school. Miss Smith rarely showed up at the committee, but when she did, she often dozed off and got scolded by the chairman. In my free time, I enjoyed reading books about art and design, which eventually inspired me to pursue a career as a graphic designer. A year later, Miss Smith graduated from middle school, and my unrequited love, whom I never even obtained contact information for, ended. When I entered my second year of middle school, my school life turned quite miserable. Hey, the stalker of Miss Smith is in the same class this year. It was Johnson who said that, and he was in my class. He was the center of the class, always surrounded by a group of friends. At his word, almost all my classmates started giving me cold stares. What? Bob was stalking Miss Smith, the beautiful captain of the track team. Yeah, this guy, all happy because Miss Smith talked to him once, even became a librarian like her. Creepy, isn't it? That's messed up. Laughs and scornful looks were thrown at me from all around. No, that's not true. What? Can't hear you. Your voice is too soft. Oh right, you don't want to strain yourself, do you? Johnson and his followers laughed mockingly. Crushed by their pressure, I couldn't find the words to fight back. From then on, the only place I found solace in my school life was the library after school. I spent my middle school days under Johnson's constant ridicule and the cold stares of others, continually studying design alone. However, as a silver lining, the student advertisement poster I created for the competition won first place in the middle school division. Regrettably, I had no friends to share my achievement with. The award plaque was simply displayed at a corner of my room. In my third year, I was finally in a different class from Johnson, but the bad rumors about me had already spread throughout the grade. Consequently, I had no classmates to talk to, and the last page of my yearbook remained blank. My lonely middle school life ended quietly. I remember feeling a mix of envy and frustration when I saw Johnson, who had made my life miserable, shed tears of sentiment at graduation. "Mr. Bob, we've arrived." "Uh-oh, we're here already." Lost in my thoughts, I hadn't noticed the taxi had pulled up in front of my house. Miss Smith, sitting next to me, looked concerned. "I'll wait here. I've informed the company I'll be returning with Vice President Bob." "Yes, I'll be right back." After remembering the Miss Smith from my past, and then being addressed as Vice President by the current Miss Smith, I felt a strange sense of surrealism. After graduating middle school, I studied art abroad, started a business with friends I met there, and worked hard as a designer. Eventually, my company grew into a major graphic design firm. I'm now a designer and vice president, tackling challenges every day, something my younger self couldn't have imagined, let alone reuniting with my first love. However, our relationship is purely professional now, and I couldn't possibly mention these past feelings. I don't even know if Miss Smith is married. We never speak of our personal matters. Bringing up that she was my first love would only make things awkward. Sorry for the wait. Let's head back to the office. After taking a shower and changing into a new suit at home, I returned to the taxi where Miss Smith was working on her laptop. As the taxi started moving, she stopped typing, glanced at her watch, and said, "We're heading to the office, but please wait at the entrance floor, Mr. Bob. I need to pick up some updated documents from the sales department." Understood. Miss Smith's dedication to her work naturally made me sit up straighter. Miss Smith always anticipates and acts upon my thoughts without needing any instruction from me. Moreover, she perfectly manages my schedules and appointments. Additionally, she has superb talent for finding good restaurants according to the client's taste. Even if I ask her to book a table for an unanticipated business meeting at the last minute, she never gets rattled. She is an absolutely outstanding secretary. She is too good for someone like me. Come to think of it, Miss Smith, a notably beautiful secretary, never seems to be pursued by the men at our company. Probably, like in her student days, she's seen as someone out of reach. It's almost surprising that someone as capable and talented as her works as my secretary. As I ponder this, familiar streets start to come into view, and soon, we arrive at our company, a large white building, impressive both in height and width. Our company, which prioritizes merit, operates on the principle of freedom. Due to this corporate culture, you may see casually dressed employees engaging in chat at the lobby or having lunch on the benches in the courtyard, some even working on their laptops there. This scene is so relaxed and friendly, almost like a university campus at lunchtime, that the security guards at the entrance seem almost out of place. As I take in the surroundings, Miss Smith gets out first to open my door and stands slightly behind me as we walk towards the front entrance. "Welcome back, Vice President." "Thank you. Keep up the good work this afternoon." Then, the security guard had the automatic door opened and waited for me. The entrance hall is dominated by white, and its atrium extends to the third floor. The large marble reception desk is manned by staff, welcoming me with ear-to-ear smiles. The free yet sophisticated corporate culture is a complete realization of the dream my partners and I had when we started the business. "Vice President Bob, I'll go fetch the documents, so please wait in the lobby," Miss Smith says and strides toward the elevator hall. After watching her leave, I head to a nearby sofa, but then realize my stomach is growling. Right, I haven't eaten anything since yesterday. Thinking Miss Smith won't be back yet, I walk to the nearby shop. Inside the shop, I'm greeted by a variety of choices, from sandwiches to boxed meals. Before my days of constantly being out of the office, this shop was my go-to for meals. I quickly grab a sandwich and a soda and join the line at the checkout counter. This store during past lunchtimes is quite busy, so I have to wait for a while to check out. I overhear an employee in front of me muttering. Probably, he is practicing for a presentation, and I am impressed by his diligence. As I checked out and carefully placed my sandwich in my bag to avoid it getting crushed, I hear footsteps approaching and a male voice saying, "Hey, there stood a man in a suit. looking straight at me. While I squinted at the vaguely familiar face, he is coming toward me, grinning. To my surprise, it was Johnson, all grown up. "Hey, aren't you Bob? What are you doing in a place like this?" I was astonished at this sudden reunion. "Johnson." I scrutinized his face, then his employee ID hanging around his neck. Sure enough, it had Johnson's name and read Sales Department. I was stunned by this unexpected reunion, but Johnson let out a big sigh and said, "Johnson, since when did you start calling me so casually?" Casually. Johnson showed obvious irritation. "Yeah, calling me without an honorific title. Who do you think you are?" It had been a long time since someone had spoken to me like that, so I was just bewildered. "You work at this company." As I muttered, Johnson leaned in and said, "Don't you know basic business manners? If you've been rude, you should apologize first." He then tapped my shoulder with the documents he was holding. "Why on earth are you, a loner from middle school, doing in a place like this?" Obviously, Johnson believes that I'm not a part of this company. Even facing the person who had made my school days so dark, I strangely felt nothing. Although Johnson's behavior was somewhat annoying, I felt no anger, only a sense of nostalgia for the unchanged Johnson from those days. "You're right, sorry about that. It's been a while, Mr. Johnson." As I responded with a smile, Johnson's face twisted into a frown. "What? Can't you answer my question? Why are you here? And you're not wearing a visitor's ID. Did you sneak in or something?" Johnson laughed mockingly. His behavior was irritating, but I knew I couldn't rise to his provocation because I am now the vice president of this company. If I were to get angry at Johnson right here, it could lead to serious consequences. If I, the vice president, had lost my temper with him, Johnson would undoubtedly face repercussions from his superiors. Indeed, Johnson's arrogant attitude lacks the etiquette and manners indispensable for working individuals. I can't let my emotions control my professionalism. If I do, it could jeopardize the future of my employee. So, I hold myself and kept my anger under control. "Hey, are you listening?" "Yeah, I hear you. Actually, I work here." As I was about to reveal my position, Johnson interrupted me with a laugh. "I get it. You came here to pitch some sales, right? There are always these bottom-feeding salesmen who don't know their place." "No, it's not like that." I tried to correct his assumption, but Johnson didn't stop talking. "So, you disappeared after middle school. Did you drop out and get a job? Otherwise, there's no way you'd end up in a place like this." Johnson continued to laugh and clap, looking down on me. Seeing that Johnson wasn't listening to me at all, I stopped trying to explain myself. "Are you an employee here, Johnson?" Then, as if proud to be asked, Johnson showed me his employee ID and raised his voice triumphantly. "Of course I am. See, it says Sales Department right here. Well, if you had met me a little later, it would have been Head of Sales Department." Well, that's impressive. The thought of arrogant and mocking Johnson possibly becoming the head of the sales department made me extremely concerned about the future of the department. Anyway, I don't have much time for talking to Johnson. Miss Smith might be back at the entrance by now. I ended the conversation and headed to my next task. "Well, I have somewhere to be, so I'll be going. It was nice seeing you after all this time." As I said this and tried to walk past Johnson, he smirked and grabbed my arm. "Where do you think you're going?" "The exit is that way." Johnson pointed towards the entrance. "No, I have some business at the entrance." "What are you talking about?" "Get out of here. Don't make me say it again." "No, I mean, I have to." Seeing my hesitant response, Johnson burst out laughing. "You really don't get how incompetent you are, do you? You might wear an expensive suit, but here, everyone won't judge by appearances. What's inside matters most. Someone like you coming here for sales would just be turned away." Johnson's condescending laughter and remarks were increasingly aggravating. "Who says they look at what's inside?" I muttered under my breath, but Johnson, with his sharp ears, snapped, "What? You got something to say?" Staying any longer would not lead to anything good. I began to think of a way to leave the situation. However, Johnson, unfazed, raised his voice again. "Get out, you suspicious person. Do you want to be reported?" His voice echoed around, drawing the attention of employees peering down from the second and third floor corridors. Employees around the shop were also looking over with concern. Sensing the attention on him, Johnson deliberately raised his voice. "Someone like you at the bottom wouldn't be entertained here for sales, but I am." Just as my anger reached its limit and I was about to reveal my identity regardless of Johnson or the onlookers, I heard the sound of high heel shoes clicking on the floor. Looking towards the source of the sound, I saw Miss Smith, holding documents and walking straight towards us with a composed posture. Before I could speak, Johnson approached Miss Smith. "Miss Smith, it's been a while. I'm lucky to see you, always with the executives. Oh, don't ignore me, please." Miss Smith, without giving a glance to the jubilantly talking Johnson, continued walking towards me. She stood in front of me, alternating her gaze between my eyes and a wristwatch. "Ah, this guy is a suspicious person. I just caught him," Johnson said unabashedly, still smiling at Miss Smith, seemingly captivated by her beauty. Miss Smith, continuing to ignore Johnson, took a deep breath. "Were you here, Vice President?" Vice President." Johnson looked genuinely surprised by Miss Smith's words. "I'm sorry. I dropped by the shop and took some time. I was looking for you." "Well, it's fine. There's still time before the meeting." Vice President." This dude." Johnson's voice, filled with confusion, echoed once again through the entrance. Miss Smith, frowning at his voice, looked sharply at Johnson. "Johnson, what are you saying? Even if there's a history, I cannot tolerate such disrespect any longer." Although her tone was typically calm and collected, it now carried a distinctly cold edge. But Miss Smith, you were joking just now." However, Johnson remained smitten, seemingly more pleased to be talking with Miss Smith than concerned about the situation. Seeing this, Miss Smith inhaled sharply, making me want to look away. "This person is not only our vice president, but also one of our leading designers, Mr. Bob." Miss Smith's voice resonated through the entrance. At first, Johnson nodded and hummed in agreement, but his movements stopped midway. Really? This dude?" Johnson's voice was filled with disbelief. His head spinning in total confusion, Johnson shook his head and kept alternating his gaze between Miss Smith and me. Miss Smith cleared her throat and said, "Perhaps we should discuss this matter with the head of the sales department." Her gaze on Johnson was icy. "Wait a minute. I didn't know anything." "Right, Bob." Johnson, almost begging me for mercy. He had sweat on his forehead and tears in his eyes. I felt sorry for Johnson, though I wondered if it was right to let him off the hook at this moment. If someone had been as disrespectful to a senior executive as Johnson was, no one would escape without facing suspension. That's why I was contemplating whether Johnson should be similarly punished. Why? How is Bob the vice president? Why?" Johnson, still unable to grasp that I was the vice president, started to stutter. Seeing his confusion, Miss Smith softened her tone and beckoned him closer. "Johnson, come close and listen to me." Almost in a daze, Johnson leaned in to hear what Miss Smith had to say. The next moment, there was a dull thud from Johnson's direction. Ouch! Looking over, I saw Johnson holding his head, apparently having received a small thump from Miss Smith. "If you seek forgiveness, you should start by apologizing." Miss Smith's words led to Johnson immediately softening. "I'm sorry. I was disrespectful. I'm sorry." He apologized me meekly. As Miss Smith crossed her arms and looked at Johnson, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. And with that, I couldn't help but chuckle at Johnson's past rudeness. "What are you laughing at?" "Bob, sir." Sorry. It just brought back memories." "It's okay, Johnson. I'll let it slide this time. Just make sure you don't do this to anyone else." When I spoke kindly, Johnson's eyes teared up, and he nodded earnestly. Miss Smith then showed a gentle smile that one would never see during work hours, as if she had just resolved a children's fight. "Sorry, Bob. Honestly, I had no idea that you were the vice president here." Johnson sounded genuinely apologetic. "No wonder, after graduating from middle school, I studied design abroad. I set up this company with some colleagues I met there. It makes sense you didn't know." As I explained, Johnson looked at me with wide, sparkling eyes. "You went on an art study abroad. That's amazing. he exclaimed excitedly, before looking down guiltily again. Sorry, buddy, about back then. No, I mean, sir, I apologize. I did terrible things. You've completely outdone me now. I'll think more before I act. Johnson's apology was undoubtedly about our middle school days. Even though he offered his apology now, it wouldn't bring back those times or make my middle school memories any better. But I felt that if I didn't forgive him here, I might carry this burden forever. So, I smiled kindly at Johnson, deciding to forgive everything. It's okay. And you don't have to change your attitude. We're classmates, aren't we? Tears welled up in Johnson's eyes at my words. With a choked voice, he said, Thank you. I'm sorry. I feel ashamed of how narrow-minded I've been. Miss Smith, watching this scene, showed a look of relief. But now that I think about it, why did you dislike me back then? I never did anything to you, Johnson. Ah, that's because. Johnson glanced at Miss Smith as he spoke. Miss Smith, sensing something, chuckled softly, then said, Maybe it was jealousy. Remember, Johnson, you confessed to me at my graduation, saying it was your first love. Johnson blushed and gave a sheepish smile at her words. The woman who had stolen the first loves of two men in this room, Miss Smith, seemed almost sinfully charming. After a while, Miss Smith looked at her watch and directly at me. Mr. Bob, it's about time. Ah, yes. Johnson, we have to go, but let's catch up some other time. Ah, yes. Miss Smith and I said goodbye to Johnson and headed towards the elevator hall. As we were about to enter the elevator, Johnson ran after us, saying, Do your best, Vice President, and continued to bow deeply until the doors closed. Once the doors closed and the elevator became quiet, I let out a big sigh. Miss Smith chuckled, perhaps recalling her own middle school days, and finding the incident amusing, reminiscent of our school days. Don't laugh, you'll make Johnson feel bad. No, that's not why I'm laughing, she continued, still chuckling mischievously. When you found out Johnson's first love was me, your face was priceless. As if you were saying, you too. Yeah. Oh, that's because. Flustered, I was met with Miss Smith's devilish smile. I wondered if I should confess my old feelings when a question crossed my mind. By the way, before you were assigned as my secretary, didn't you originally work as the president's secretary? At that time, did you know about me? Miss Smith stopped chuckling and looked at me with a slight smile. Yes, of course. That's why I requested this position. I believe my abilities would be best utilized working for you. You're overqualified for my secretary, right? Not exactly. You know, the president is quite a romantic, so he understood right away. Her words made me wonder again. I know he is romantic. When he proposed marriage to his now wife, he took her on an exclusive helicopter night cruise with a bouquet of 100 roses. But how does that story relate? As I spoke, Miss Smith resumed checking her documents with a sly smile. It seemed she wouldn't reveal the answer until I figured it out myself. As the elevator reached the conference room floor and doors opened, I opened the soda I had bought earlier for a boost. Seeing this, Miss Smith said, 100 roses bouquet is attractive, but I'd be just as happy with 100 cans of sodas. I don't mind the language of flowers. A can of soda have a special meaning for us, right, Bob? Hearing her words, I understood everything and blushed, hiding my flushed face as I opened the conference room door.